The sound of tearing paper sliced through the polished hush of first class like a blade. Elle Monroe stood motionless, stunned, as her boarding pass split clean down the center in the hands of a flight attendant who hadn't even flinched. The halves fluttered to the floor like wounded birds, the remnants of her seat assignment tumbling into plush carpet under glittering champagne flutes and stunned silence. Across from her, Brooke Whitman, the lead flight attendant, stood tall and unyielding. Her blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun, her Meridian Air uniform pressed to military precision, and her posture stiff with judgment. "This isn't first class," Brooke said, voice crisp and cold, more accusation than information. Elle didn't speak. She bent slowly, picked up the torn boarding pass, and straightened, her eyes locking on Brooke's with calm fire. Whispers swirled like smoke through the cabin. Did she really tear it? Who is she? What just happened? Seat 1A, Elle said, her voice low but resolute. She reached into her blazer and retrieved her phone. Her screen lit up instantly. Brooke's nostrils flared as she opened her mouth, but before she could speak, another voice rang out from a nearby seat. "Sweetheart, you're blocking my view." The words slid like silk from Corinne Drake's lips, a frequent flyer with platinum status and a reputation for wielding it like a blade. Her heels clicked against the wood trim as she adjusted in her seat, her cream pantsuit unblemished, her tone sharp. Elle knew Corinne's type, used to control, expecting deference. But Elle smiled. "Hold on," she said, raising her phone. "I'd like to record this moment. Let's make it memorable." She hit record. A flash. In seat 3C, a young man in a hoodie raised his phone too. She caught his name earlier, Tyrese. He gave her a nod. She wasn't alone. Brooke's lips curled. "I'm going to have to ask you to step aside." Elle held up one finger. 1 second. Her thumb moved swiftly. In the next instant, the cabin lights flickered. A soft chime rang overhead, and the PA system crackled. The captain's voice, clipped and unmistakable, broke through the tension. "Captain Ruiz to cabin crew. Corporate directive, ground flight 321 immediately." Gasps. Crystal flutes froze mid-sip. One passenger dropped a tablet. Corinne's knuckles whitened on her armrest. Brooke paled. Elle tucked her phone away. She didn't move. The torn pass remained on the armrest, ignored and irrelevant. All eyes were on her. Who is she? 3 years earlier, Elle had walked into a modest office building in downtown Atlanta, carrying nothing but a worn leather portfolio and a fire in her chest. Skybridge Cares, her brainchild, her mission, had one goal: honor veterans by giving them the dignity of travel. She pitched in front of skeptical investors, her voice unwavering, her slides showing photos of aging heroes returning to see their grandchildren or attend long-delayed surgeries. She secured $2.5 million in funding that day. Now, over 2,000 veterans had flown with Skybridge. Her organization had changed lives, and with it, the standards of how service and respect could coexist in an industry driven by profit margins. And today, Meridian Air's partnership with Skybridge Cares was about to be tested in front of the world. Elle stepped forward in the cabin. Murmurs followed her like a current. She passed Tyrese and nodded. He gave a quiet thumbs up. A flight attendant at the galley handed her a glass of water, a silent gesture of solidarity. Near the bulkhead, a child whispered to her mother, pointing at Elle. "Is she a queen?" the little girl asked. Elle crouched briefly beside her. "Princesses," she said with a smile, "can change the world." Then she stood tall again, her eyes sweeping over the seated passengers and landing once more on Brooke. "Respect," she said softly, "isn't optional. It's earned." Brooke opened her mouth again, but Elle was already moving. From her blazer pocket, she retrieved a special identification card, platinum executive status, earned not by miles but by legacy. It shimmered under the cabin lights as Brooke's mouth opened and shut again. "You have status?" Brooke stammered. Elle nodded. Then, for the benefit of the camera still recording behind her, she said, "Status doesn't matter when respect is denied. But just so we're clear, I belong in 1A. She sat. Brooke hesitated. Passengers stared. The older gentleman in seat 2A began to clap, slow, deliberate. Then others joined. Elle didn't look up. She simply sipped her water. Corinne, across the aisle, sneered. "I have flown first class over 50 times this year. My status doesn't entitle you to degrade others," Elle interrupted. "Skybridge Cares stands for dignity. No boarding pass changes that." Brooke's voice, brittle now, returned. "If you don't vacate, I'll call security." Elle tapped her smartwatch twice. The lights dimmed again. On every screen in the cabin, a message appeared. Flight 321 grounded by sponsor directive. Gasps. Glasses trembled. A mother clutched her child. The aircraft shuddered not from turbulence, but from truth. Captain Ruiz's voice came again. By directive of our sponsor, Skybridge Cares, Flight 321 is grounded. Please remain seated. Brooke stepped back. Curran's cheeks burned. Tyrese zoomed in. Elle tapped her screen again. The cabin's cameras went live, streaming to Skybridge Care's secure cloud. Elena Torres, her operations director, was already pushing footage to press outlets and partner networks. It wasn't just a confrontation anymore. It was a reckoning. 2 uniformed security officers entered through the front. Brooke gestured toward Elle. She's the one. One officer hesitated. We've received conflicting orders. Elle stood calmly. I will disembark if Captain Ruiz or FAA officials order me. Until then, I'm staying seated. No more scenes. No more silence. One officer nodded. Understood. Corinne exploded. This is absurd. You've weaponized charity. An elderly woman across the aisle muttered, she's restoring dignity. The cabin echoed in support. Brooke turned, defeated. Elle sat once more, adjusting the sleeve of her blazer. The torn boarding pass sat preserved under her glass. Minutes passed. Then, over the intercom, we've received clearance to taxi back to the gate. Cabin crew, maintain positions. Passengers didn't cheer. They didn't complain. They watched. As the aircraft rolled back, Elle stared out the window. The Atlanta skyline rose in the distance. Back in the operations center, Elena stood surrounded by screens displaying media alerts, social media trends, and encrypted uploads. One folder flashed, Langley bribe audio confirmed. Elle tapped her earpiece. Play it. Seconds later, the cabin filled with the unmistakable voices of Karen Langley and Victor Hayes. Slip him the envelope. Handle her quietly. The air turned cold. Brooke froze. Karen's face drained of color. Passengers recorded, live-streamed, shared. Every whisper, every shrug of indifference now caught in digital amber. Elle stepped toward the PA. What you heard is proof. When silence enables injustice, speaking out becomes a duty. Thank you for bearing witness. Applause. Real applause. The moment Elle stepped off the plane, reporters swarmed. Flashbulbs, microphones, all aiming to capture a woman who'd rewritten the rules. What's next? They asked. Change, Elle replied. Real change. She walked to the operations building, past stunned staff and red-eyed crew. Inside, in a glass-walled room, Elena greeted her. The files are out. FAA wants a meeting. Meridian's board has called an emergency session. Elle smiled faintly. Time to rebuild. Over the next hours, directives were issued. Suspensions. Audits. Apologies. Jessica Reed was removed from her duties. Victor Hayes fired. Karen Langley's elite status revoked. The CEO of Meridian Air, forced to face Elle across a long mahogany table, heard her demands clearly. This is not about a seat, Elle told them. It's about every passenger who was ever made to feel small. The board caved. They accepted Skybridge's advisory council, transparency reforms, and mandatory bias training. 6 months later, Elle stood at the gate of a Skybridge-sponsored charter. A group of scholarship students, many flying for the first time, boarded with wide eyes. Among them was Jasmine Nguyen, daughter of a waitress, valedictorian of her class. Elle crouched beside her. Use this flight to dream bigger. Jasmine nodded. As the plane lifted into the sky, Elle stood with Elena watching it disappear into the clouds. The boarding pass that had once been torn now sat framed on her desk. Underneath it, a single sentence. One voice, when raised with purpose, can bring an industry to its knees and then build it back stronger. And Elle Monroe? She wasn't just a passenger anymore. She was the one who reminded the world that the skies belong to everyone.